Welcome to episode 5 of the IIT Madras Alumni Association Fireside Chat. We introduce alumni who are doing interesting things to our alumni audience. And today I'm delighted to have with us Mr. Anuj Gupta, who's a policy expert. I'm Rajiv Srinivasan, class of 78 Electronics, and I'm a member of the IITMAA EC Executive Committee. So we are at a point where everybody has come to the realization that policy is very, very important. Just look at China, right? Their success is principally due to the amount of industrial policy they've been able to put together and, in a very concerted manner, take forward for the last 20 years or so. And even somebody as doctrinaire as the World Bank, which didn't used to support industrial policy, just made a U-turn about 2 or 3 months ago, and now they are far more open to the idea that industrial policy is helpful, which is pretty self-evident if you look around. So the question here is there a mechanism whereby India can emulate that? And also, how can we change the mindset? Because we tend in India to think of the government as more of an obstacle than a collaborator an ally. So I think the point that I would request Anuj to make today is how do you change that mindset and look upon government as a facilitator? That's something that Anuj is an expert at. So without further ado, let me introduce him in terms of his very impressive background. Anuj is the managing director of policy consulting firm BowerGroupAsia. BowerGroupAsia is present in 30 plus countries in the world and helps Fortune 500 companies enter or expand in a country and operate at the intersection of policy and business. Anuj previously was a vice president at Tata Sons and spent a decade in the Indian and Abu Dhabi governments, where he shaped flagship policies across trade and industry, energy, finance, technology, infrastructure, and startups. As Chief of Staff to Commerce and Industry Minister Piyush Goyal, he was instrumental in India's recent economic, trade, and supply chain realignment. He has worked in 10 plus ministries with experience ranging from energy, mining, transportation, industry, trade, and food. Anuj holds an MBA from IIM Bangalore and a BTech ME 2003 from IIT Madras. He's also an alumnus of Mays Business School, Texas A&M University. In his spare time, he enjoys reading more than 100 books a year and exploring ideas at the intersection of policy, innovation, and global development. So it's my great pleasure to welcome Anuj to our podcast today. And take it away, Anuj. Please give the let me also lay out our before Anuj comes on. Let me also lay out the way the format is going to be. Anuj is going to speak for about 5 minutes, giving his opening statement, and then we'll have about 45 minutes of a back and forth between Anuj and me on several questions that come out of his opening statement. And then we'll have about 15, 20 minutes for questions from you guys in the audience. And the way I'd like to request you do this is please go to the bottom of the screen where you'll see a button that says chat. And please type in your questions into that chat window. And a request, kindly turn off your audio at this point. All of you, please turn off the audio so it doesn't interrupt others. And let me repeat, enter your questions into the chat window and we'll handle them at about the 50-minute mark. So without further ado, let me request Anuj to please go ahead and make your opening statement. Welcome and thank you very much for taking the time to join us today, Anuj.
No, thank you, Rajiv. It's a delight to be back at IITM Alumni Association, and many thanks to so many people who have taken out this valuable Sunday morning to listen to a very boring man. I would try to keep it as interactive as possible and probably share a lot more about what happened to me and what I did, rather than just talking in abstract, theories or principles. But as Rajiv was saying, uh, a lot of people actually don't think much about the government. They just go about living their life, running their business, and sometimes they would like to never think about it. In fact, when I joined the government of India in 2014, somebody told me it's the largest canvas you can ever paint on, and I was not prepared for the scale. There were 25 crore people in 2014 who did not have electricity. So, for example, sometimes we forget to charge our phone in the night, and the next day we are miserable, right? So we have to look for the power bank. We can't move around so much. We have to tell somebody who calls us that my battery is low. But imagine somebody's life who does not have electricity at all. So no mobile phones, no TV, no internet, no laptop. Forget about AC, no fans, nothing. There were 25 crore people living that life just a decade back. There were 37 crore people below poverty line. These numbers are so large, they actually become irrelatable, but they are a reality. And by virtue of that fact, government is also a major shaper of market structure. It determines which sectors will get focused on, how capital will move, etc., etc. And uh, based on my decade of working with governments, I realized that there are certain basic principles and thought processes which government adopts. In fact, there are principles for political institutions as well as for the government, and it's important to engage with them to understand the kind of opportunities and risks which will arise. On a personal note, as a libertarian, I would rather have a very minimal government. But the reality is that I always say this, that, for example, central banks are called as lenders of last resort. As many of you work in finance would know this. I always call the government as the actor of last resort. When everything else fails, and the government will step in. And massive widespread poverty is a failure. And let's talk about what how government shapes the market, and how what shapes the government. Thanks, Rajiv.
Thank you, Anuj, for that uh, sort of, should I say, dramatic example of how, in a few years' time, the government has been able to uplift a large number of people who have electricity, and the number of people under the poverty line has gone down significantly in India. But more recently, I guess in the last month or two, we have seen how the Hormuz blockade has been a huge hindrance to all of us, right, in many ways. And we're at a time when policy statements, or even just indications of direction, can move markets. For example, the government has done a remarkable job of keeping prices low, as you have also discussed on TV, and then we had the example of the Prime Minister's call to conserve energy, reduce gold purchases, etc., just a couple of days ago, which got a lot of reactions. And then also, maybe day after, well, let me see, day before yesterday, there was the announcement of a 37,000 crore plan for coal gasification. Now, this is significant in terms of not just the 37,500, coal gasification alone, but I believe the impact will be 2.5 lakh crores worth of business in many diverse areas, including, for example, urea for fertilizer, which of course is extremely important for the agricultural economy. So we have, the impact of government decisions are huge. So, as you mentioned a minute ago, government really is a shaper of markets rather than our usual view of government as an obstacle or a regulator. Can you comment on that a little bit more about the market shaping activity that governments are able to have?
Uh, Absolutely, Rajiv. In fact, when I went into the government, I also had this opinion that government should be largely irrelevant. Fortunately or unfortunately, if you look at the experience of Asian tigers, so you have Japan, of course, Korea, the core tigers, Korea, Taiwan, the Southeast Asian countries. Uh, the government and the industrial policy, as you mentioned, actually had a very critical role in developing these countries. We always think that industry will figure out what to do, will develop itself, but the real invisible hand is sometimes the government. And I think when people look at, you spoke about multiple announcements by the government and how industry should react to it, how individuals should react to it. I think a lot of it boils down to what I call as trust. You know,
Government policy at business
will
करके
you if people know that you will largely do what you say, then they will start taking you very seriously. So let me give you two examples over here. I think very everybody knows these examples. How seriously will you take President Trump's tweet or Truth Social or whatever you want to call it versus a tweet of Prime Minister Modi? So you have a lot of announcements being made by Trump. I'm not saying that they are not material. So of course, a lot of them are, are shaking the entire world. But when he sometimes say, "Okay, today a civilization will die," then you say, "Okay, I think this tweet may die before the civilization dies." Whereas if for example, yesterday Prime Minister announced that this decade is a decade of conflict and shocks. And it may actually, because of COVID, you had COVID, then you have the Middle Eastern crisis, you have wars after one after another. And if you have that, you can potentially wipe out decades of progress of people who came out of poverty will go back below poverty line. He made that very stark statement. Now, given his background, I would say a lot of people will listen to that very carefully. And the reason for that is because he has a certain track record. He has built a certain trust in terms of doing things which he says largely. Of course, nobody is perfect, and one can give many examples where this did not happen. So we must understand the credibility and how trust operates between government and citizens. And as somebody who sits outside the government, what do you have to do? We of course do not have to take every policy statement as a fact. You have to look at what are the drivers of that, what are the facts behind it. So, for example, Rajiv, you spoke about fuel prices. If I may just take that example again, I will not speak about the global situation. Everybody knows all the countries are impacted. We import so much crude. 85% of our crude comes from outside India. Everybody knows. But the fact is, the poor still need to live a life of dignity with lower cost of living. So, apart from global factors, what is driving the fuel prices? I know, of course, a lot of people say taxes are the issue. Central government has very high taxes. Why don't they reduce it? I'll give you three facts over here. Number one, which some of us over here may not know. Number one, do you know over the last 4 years, taxes imposed by the central government on petrol and diesel have come down by 65%. I think a lot of people will not be even aware of it. So it was 33 rupees a liter in 22. Now it is 12 rupees a liter. If you look at the state taxes, some states actually charge three times what the central government charges on petrol and diesel. And the result is that you have a huge difference in petrol prices across states, to the extent uh, that in Andaman and Nicobar, petrol cost 85 rupees a liter. In Telangana, it's close to 100, 13 liter or so. So 40% difference. So once you know that, then you can peel the onion and say, okay, let's be proportionate over here. Who are the parties who have to do something about it, whether it is oil marketing companies, state government, central government, and can you hold them accountable and ask them to do what's in their power? I think as somebody who will deal with the government, engage with the government, and as a citizen, one must prepare and understand the facts. And if you do that, you will achieve a lot more success, and I would say probably be a lot less frustrated also.
Okay. But as you were mentioning, it looks like the government has been operating by a somewhat different logic over the last decade. As you mentioned, they've reduced the taxes on fuel, as an example, and it has succeeded in bringing up a lot of people from desperate poverty. In fact, if I remember right, India no longer has the largest number of desperately poor people in the world. It is Nigeria, or I mean, it's an unfortunate fact, but yeah, India has done that. So, what exactly has happened over the last decade? What is the logic, and how does it matter for all of your listeners here? Can you comment on that?
If I may define uh, the Modi government, in or the current government in one sentence, uh, is the fact that it has the ability to think and implement at scale, and I would say at astonishing speed. That's something I was not prepared for when I went into the government. So I'll give you an example. When I joined, I started my work with the power ministry in the government. There were about 20,000 villages which were not connected to any electricity at that point, and they were being electrified at a rate of about 1,000 villages per year. And So you will take, I mean, if you do like a simple arithmetic, 20,000 villages, 1,000 a year, you will say, okay, 20 years is what it will take. But you also know the fact that a lot of those villages have not been electrified because they are inaccessible. They are on top of hilly terrain, they are in the middle of rivers, across rivers, what have you. So your pace of electrification with the same effort will also slow down. And I would say it would have taken business as usual, maybe even 30 to 40 years to electrify all of them. And in 2015, I had gone to the Red Fort to listen to the Independence Day speech of the Prime Minister. And I had gone with a few colleagues of mine from the Power Ministry. And lo and behold, suddenly we heard that the Prime Minister was talking about electrifying every single village in the country. And he said, we will do it in less than 3 years, 1,000 days to be exact. So you are really going from 30 years plan to 3 years. And my colleagues were looking at each other, did not know whether they should laugh or cry. But yes, we had this extremely tough target, massive scale, astonishing speed required. But we did work backwards. We put in a plan to implement this by using technology, by using transparency, by involving people, etc., etc. And what happened finally? We did reach each one of these villages 13 days before the target date. Uh, you know, you must be, when you deal with the government, you must be conscious of the scale and speed mindset of the government. And the more you can help them meet their objectives in achieving this, the more receptive they will be. So when you go to the government, you tell them that I understand that you want to move fast, you want to solve large problems. This is how you do it, and this is how my company or we or me can help you. And when you say that, then you will see a tremendous shift in the openness towards the ideas you will bring. And I think that's the most critical approach.
That's really interesting because I hadn't thought of that. What you're saying is speed of implementation is something that's really come into the picture. You mentioned the 1,000 days implementation of electrification, and also the ports, especially the ports. I'm impressed by the speed at which we're building new ports, Sagarmala, all that, the highways. So all the infrastructure is being put in place, and I think there are also private sector partners who are extolled for their ability to implement quickly and get things done. So that's very interesting. And I guess there are things like the reviews. Didn't you mentioned to me Pragati reviews some time ago, right? Targets, dashboards, etc. And so I guess what you're saying is, if you're going to deal with the new government as it is, you need to be able to deliver, right? It's not enough to make big plans, but you need to be able to show solid delivery. That's very important, and I guess we see that also in the India stack, right? UPI, right? All those things, and the Jam, Trinity, etc. And you also, I guess there are improved mechanisms for dealing with reducing the difficulty of dealing with government. The GEM, right,
Yeah.
re-procurement. So all those things are helping remove some of the obstacles, and that's something that's uh, reducing friction in government. That's great. Now,
Yeah.
just to move on to another question. See, there is a need for root cause analysis, right?
Yeah.
Instead of just attacking the symptoms, you need to go look at the structure and fix whatever problems there are. And this implementation focus is one of those things. What are the biggest structural problems you see, and how can business take advantage of those unresolved problems at this time?
Yeah. Uh, I think you made a very good point over there, Rajiv. You spoke about ports in particular. I would like to just add a few data points over there because some of us may not be aware of this. Sometimes I feel that there is a despondency about the country, that nothing will happen. We are almost doomed to remain the way we are. But let's just take one sector, ports. And when we were growing up, we had this image that there'll be a customs officer who will come to the port, he will extract money, the ships will come and the cranes will be so slow, there'll be a union sitting at the port not letting it function. I think a lot of Hindi movies probably also covered that. What is the status of the efficiency of Indian ports today? The Indian ports have a turnaround time of zero point 0.9 days right now. So when a ship comes, how quickly can you unload and let it go back? Uh, what is the turnaround time of Singapore? Singapore is, heralded as one of the most efficient economies in the world, driven by its maritime prowess, its ports. Singapore is actually less efficient than India. India is zero point 0.9 days, Singapore is 1.1 days, US is 1.5 days. So we're actually the most efficient in the world, and people don't realize that. And what you said was absolutely right. Why is that happening? Because we have there are certain private sector entities also, and I will not name them, but everybody knows who I'm talking about, who run very large ports in the country, and they have done it so well that all the numbers have gone up. So there is a huge role for the private sector here. And you spoke about root cause analysis, and I'll give a very small example in brief here. whenever we used to get, so people in the government, there is a term called representation. Some of us may understand that term. Representation is basically maybe closer to what is called a petition. Of course, hopefully not as subservient as that, but representation is basically you place your problem in front of the government. So we used to get a lot of representations, and one thing we always tried to do was that not solve one person's problem, but look at the policy which is leading to this problem and solve the policy, so that one person has represented to the government, but there are probably a million others who have the same problem. If you solve the problem of only one person, the other million still have the same problem. So can you solve the policy? So I'll give an interesting example, also from a technical perspective. Now, a lot of us are in South India, and we know there are tremendous number of people who come from uh, UP, Bihar to work in South India, to work in West India. And we got a letter once from somebody, like migrant worker, so that I used to get ration. I think hopefully everybody understands what's ration. Ration is basically what the government gives a certain quantity of food grain, food stuff through shops, which are at subsidized rates, or certain amount is free, and people access that to reduce their cost of living. So somebody said, I'm from Bihar and I'm working in Gujarat. I used to get ration in Bihar. I can't get it in Gujarat. Can something be done about it? Because ultimately it's all about economics, right? I'm coming to Gujarat to work, to save money, but if I have to spend more on ration, it actually upsets the apple cart. So we said that's a very good idea. Can we do something to have, just like you have the mobile number portability, can you have the ration card to become portable? So you have a ration card in Chennai, you can go to Bangalore and collect your ration, for example. And we could do that because we had this backbone of India Stack, as you mentioned. Everything is Aadhaar linked, so it doesn't matter. You don't have to go to your own shop. And we thought that once we do this, a lot of people across states will be able to access this ration, and there'll be a lot of what we call interstate distribution. Somebody from Bihar will take it in Gujarat, etc., etc. We rolled out the program, very successful, great adoption. When we looked at the data, it actually came out as a shock, because the interstate data, of course, was large, but the intra-city data was actually much larger. So what was happening over here was that, suppose you go to a ration shop which is, say, on your street, and this again goes back to the traditional picture Hindi movies paint. You go to the ration shop, he'll give you some extremely poor quality food grains, will not give you the quantity you require. Probably there'll be worms in your ration. But people had no recourse earlier. Now we realize that if you have a ration shop in your street, and there is another ration shop which is 2 streets away, which actually has better quality food grains, gives the entire quantity which is allocated to you, you will actually vote with your feet and go to that ration shop and not go to the ration shop in your street. So now the government actually had data to say which ration shops are actually being managed well, which ones are really helping the customer better. And then we could rationalize the ration shops and incentivize them to say, you are not performing well, not many people are choosing to buy from you. Why should you not be shut down? This is, you have this period of 6 months, either shape up or ship out. And lo and behold, I think it changed the efficiency of the system dramatically. So this is what happens when you get into the root cause. So again, for businesses, get into uh, what is the government really trying to solve, rather than what they are stating as a problem. And if you do that, then you will actually be able to get into the window of decision making when the change is being planned and materially impacted. Thank you.
Interesting. That's I had no idea this kind of data was being generated and used. And a couple of things that came very became very clear. One is the outcome focus, right? You need to have appropriate outcomes, and the second is scale. Both these are, I guess, driving factors for the Indian government at this time. Let me ask you a different question, which is, see, we keep hearing about a whole lot of different policies and programs. We got Swachh Bharat, you got Ayushman Bharat, the ONDC, PLI, okay, and how can businesses work with these things? How do you read this? What do you need to do to be able to plug in, if you will, into sort of the APIs that the government is putting out there?
Uh, so I did mention something about India Stack and how it's being used, and again, couple of facts over here. I think this one a lot of people will know that majority of world's digital payments, more than 50% of world's digital payments only happen in one single country, which is India. And of course, that's thanks to India Stack and UPI. And, uh, it's a very dynamic stack. So there are applications which are being built on this every single day. And so, for example, I have this good fortune of working with an individual called Dr. R.S. Sharma, who was the first CEO of Aadhaar, really launched it out. And he's working on something called Energy Stack. That's a program of Government of India, which says that if, say, I'm a professor at IIT Madras and I have solar panels on my roof, and if I have surplus power, and I don't like the price at which the local power company buys back my power, I can actually sell it to somebody sitting in Delhi. So Anuj Gupta sitting in Delhi can buy that power because he also doesn't like the cost at which the local power company is selling him the power. Something like that will disrupt the sector. It will change how we think of subsidies, how we consume power, how we look at cross subsidies, cost of power, cost of running industry. That's something which is coming, and it's built on the same India Stack. And I truly believe that the potential of India Stack has only been scratched at the surface, despite all we see. If you look at so there are certain Supreme Court decisions and acts which define how India Stack can be used. So earlier, only financial services and telecom companies could use Aadhaar. So all of us will know, you say open a broking account, they use Aadhaar to give you an account in couple of minutes, something which used to take maybe 50 signatures earlier. And you get a SIM card where they check your Aadhaar biometrics and they give you a SIM card. But actually, since last year, not many may know this, last year, many more sectors were opened up for access to India Stack. So, for example, e-commerce, travel and tourism, hospitality, healthcare. So, if I'm a startup, this is a hypothetical example, but I was just thinking about it. Right now, as a startup, or like what is very popular today is a D2C, direct to consumer, I'll sell. One of the biggest obstacles I face is that there is a huge amount of return, and people order, and then there is nobody actually who lives at that address. You just send it back, etc., etc. It is possible today to use Aadhaar to actually verify the consumer on your e-commerce site and say definitively, okay, this is the person, this is his background, do a check on that, and then only ship the parcels which meet the criteria, or maybe ship them at a lower cost, charge something less for somebody who does this authentication, who is willing to do this authentication with you. There are applications like that in travel and tourism which has been opened up. Hospitality has been opened up. So for example, now you go to a lot of hotels, they will ask you, give us your ID, will photocopy it, will they have to legally send it to the police station? I don't know how many people know there is a full process behind it. Now they can actually use Aadhaar to verify you directly. Go to the check-in desk. They'll use Aadhaar. That's it. You're done. No documents to be given. Nothing. Healthcare again opened up. There is something called Ayushman Bharat Digital Mission. If you use a digital ID for your health, all your health records will be available no matter where you go and no matter which application you use. It's all portable. If you're not using it, I would highly recommend pick up any of the apps which enable this. Use it. It's a lifesaver. So the question every CEO has to ask is, how can I leverage this tremendous tool of proving identity? Because that's what Aadhaar is essentially. It's just verifying. It gives a yes and no answer. Is this person who he is claiming to be? And by using that process, can I run my business better, faster, etc., etc.? Tremendous opportunity over here. If there is one thing the business, any business should do is probably think a lot more about India Stack. It's not even been scratched on its surface right now.
Very interesting. Now, I should tell you, I was at the Pan IIT conference in Bangalore yesterday, and there was a presentation on the new Aadhaar app, which talks about a number of the things that you just mentioned, where, without divulging your private information, you can verify and authenticate yourself in a number of instances, like, when you check into a hotel, you don't need to give them your full Aadhaar number, right?
Yeah.
You can still be anonymous in that sense, but the application will authenticate you. So this kind of KYC, if you will, right, is now becoming more and more available. And that whole thing, the India stack, I agree with you. There's a lot of potential there, and ONDC as well, which you alluded to, right? That you have multiple players who can come into the picture. So the incumbents are not necessarily as entrenched as they used to be, right? An insurgent who comes into the picture now has sort of a level playing field and is able to offer services and products and so on. So that's great news. I think this digital public infrastructure. I also think, for example, in the trade context, we are building this up to essentially be an alternative to SWIFT at some point. Intra, not only intra-country but inter-country money transfers and so on. So it's this digital public infrastructure is one of the most amazing things that has been done.
And I would say, I would request everybody that please read up on the kind of sectors India Stack can cover, and maybe even dare to venture out and say that ask your government to open up more sectors which have access to this stack. I personally believe there are some concerns about cybersecurity, etc., which is why they are not opening up. They believe there are capacity constraints. But I think if I were to spend a single tax dollar of government of India, this is actually the first thing I will spend it on, because the amount of productivity gain by opening up every single sector to India stack is tremendous. And of course, they are taking it globally, but I think within the country itself, there is a lot more work to be done to open it up.
Right, and there are so many things. We generally tend to think mostly about just UPI and maybe DigiLocker, but then you've got ONDC, right, GSTN, and all these are sort of opportunities for the private sector to plug in. And just in passing, I think the government is becoming a lot more open in terms of engagements with the private sector. The space sector is an example, right?
Yeah.
ISRO has been very good about opening up opportunities to the private sector. So, in passing, let me also mention the private sector in the past has not been uh, as R&D focused or willing to spend capex on long-term projects as many other nations' private sectors have been. I wonder if there's greater openness on the part of government, greater transparency, greater opportunities. I don't know. I don't know if you agree with this. I hope this will lead to more private sector, investment, not only in operations but also in future proofing their business through R&D. What do you think?
Yeah, A few thoughts over here. One is you spoke about space. I
Yeah.
do want to do a hat tip to Galaxy,
Hmm.
which has been incubated in our very own IIT Madras. And the space startups have gone from a me too to actually doing something which is first in the world. And Galaxy, when it launched its recent satellite, did exactly that. So it's changing dramatically, and you're absolutely right that there is a lot of openness at the end of the government to listen to the private sector, etc., etc. But given the kind of audience which is there, we have these tremendous technocrats, people who can span across technology, business, culture, etc. One of the areas which is repeatedly spoken about as an issue in India is the fact that we are not spending what is required on R&D, and this is not something which is a problem just of the government. But if you look at the largest private sector companies in India, they are spending a minuscule amount compared to their counterparts in China and elsewhere. I would say even like less than 10% of what others are spending as percentage of their revenue. So if globally it is 2%, we are spending less than 0.2% over here. So I think I would love to hear maybe in the Q&A, and people can write about it separately. Why is India not spending more on R&D? Why are Indian companies being so conservative? What are the structural issues which are there? Can we have innovation which probably, of course, can be much more efficient in terms of amount spent, but ultimately we do need to spend more? Do we have issues in convincing the management of Indian companies about the value of R&D which is done in India? I think it's a very, very critical issue, not spoken about so much. I had met Director Kamakoti a few days back, and he was also speaking about it. I think collectively as IIT Madras, it's our responsibility to think about how can we really bump up India in terms of R&D.
No, I agree with you. My conjecture, I'm just basing this on my feeling, is that the private sector has not invested a whole lot because they don't trust the government in some
Yeah,
sense. Okay,
right.
it's like the government may change its mind, the government may not live up to its promises, etc. So why would I want to risk my capital in R&D? But if you see a stable path and you see how things are actually moving forward, maybe that mindset will change. I hope that it will. And talk about IIT Madras in space. Of course, we got these other well-known companies, Skyroot,
Yeah.
right, and the other one I forget. Really doing very well with IIT Madras connection. So space and IIT Madras, I think there is a great deal going on. And also going back to something you said about ports. Now I live in Trivandrum, and in our vicinity we have our local port is Vizhinjam, and that's doing fantastically well. In its first year, it is going at 30% above capacity, or installed capacity, and I think trade is something that we have not played enough of a role in, and this is something that you and I discussed. Millennia past, India was the center of Indian Ocean trade, and there is no real reason why we can't get there again. And the digital public infrastructure, surprisingly, is going to play a huge part in that. But I also wanted to go back to something you said earlier about states. There is, in a federal nation, of course, there is competition between states and complaints about the center not doing enough. But in the recent past, states have been given more autonomy, and they're competing. Clearly, for example, Andhra Pradesh is competing extremely hard. There was some report yesterday about something moving from Chennai, from Tamil Nadu to Andhra Pradesh, etc. So um, the issue that we have is that everybody has been center focused, right? Business have been center focused. But is there an opportunity for them to now start looking more closely at the states and competing hard in the states themselves? What is your opinion on that?
So you spoke about the fact that states are actually getting a much higher share of the total pool of financial resources available in India. So, for example, the 14th Finance Commission actually bumped up the share of states by almost 30%. So they used to get 32% of the total money which was collected, of total revenue of which was collected. Now they get 42%. So states have a lot of leeway. Also, if you look at a significant number of policies of government of India, they are saying that, okay, we believe this reform should happen, and this is how we believe it should happen. But it is up to the states to take it forward and do more if they want to. So we all know that the historic labor law reform came out last year. And what did it do at the core of it? We have this problem. All of us hire people, and we sometimes are scared of people because they'll be very difficult to let them go when they are not required. And you don't need a permission if you are hiring below 100 people. If you go above that, then you have to go to the government for approval, which is why a lot of our Indian firms are actually below 100 people, or they outsource that hiring. What did the labor law do? They said, okay, we'll change that limit, we'll increase it by 3 times. So it became 300 people. But they did not stop at that. They said it is up to the states to change that limit as they deem fit. So, for example, immediately after that, I don't know how many of you are tracking this, one of the South Indian states had said, we will make the limit as 10,000. So just imagine you are at 100, you go from 100 times 100 with a single reform. So you go from 100 to 10,000. In fact, I was part of a very interesting discussion. Uh, every state is unique. They have different resources. So your Tamil Nadu has this tremendous coastline. Bihar is landlocked, but it has a lot of natural resources, etc. Everybody has to play to its strengths and understand what they can't and can offer. Bihar cannot offer that coastline. The exports and imports, the trade you spoke about, is difficult and costlier in Bihar. But what can Bihar do? Can Bihar come out tomorrow and say, if you hire up to 1 lakh people and you change your workforce, you don't need to get approval from government of India. Just imagine one single thing they say. We have certain like GCC is a very large sector in India. I know GCC, some of them have 50,000 people. So if Bihar comes and say, you can hire 1 lakh people, I don't care. I have nothing. I don't have jobs for my people. I can't give them social security. But what I do have is a certain policy lever to give more freedom to companies to change and operate as they deem fit. So that option is actually for the first time ever available. And I think you have to hold your local state governments, and then even taking it forward, your municipality is accountable. And the good thing is that that's happening a lot of times, because what Prime Minister Modi has put in as a vision for states is around cooperative and competitive federalism. I've been part of many discussions where, we are talking about some company evaluating a few states on where to put the investment in, massive investment. What literally happens in a lot of these cases now is that the chief minister meets you, he locks up the room, he throws away the key, he says, unless you tell me what you need, I will not let you go. And once you tell me what you need, I will do whatever you need, and you have to commit to invest in the state today. That's the level at which a lot of the states are operating. Tamil Nadu is a shining example, irrespective of political dispensation. Amazing efficiency, amazing productivity. You, of course, have the traditional West Indian states. You have Andhra, which has done wonders. For example, all of us know the data center story. Vizag out of nowhere. Where has it reached? How? It's because of Chandrababu Naidu. So I think the states are where the rubber hits the road, and states is where we have to engage a lot more.
What you just described sounds very Chinese in the sense that the Chinese governments will do this, right? Go into a room, you, at the end of it, you cannot get out until you have signed an agreement which is good for all parties. So
Yeah.
I think this cooperative or competitive federalism is good for the country because, there are states that have been handicapped by things like freight equalization in the past, right?
Yeah.
And other states that have annoyingly oppressive labor laws, like I won't mention which states, but yeah, you know who they are. So,
You
so
can you can now name it, Rajiv. There is a new government.
yeah, this is true. Okay, yeah, the new government, but the attitudes here in Kerala for sure have not been that great in terms of supporting industry. But this has got to change. We once we end up, as you mentioned, Bihar and UP and so on. These landlocked states, they are now beginning to accelerate, right? UP in particular. But I think Bihar in the long run is going to be a major winner because it's got a lot of ingredients and goes back historically to,
Exactly.
to Pataliputra and so on. So I think the regional competition is actually quite healthy. And this is something that we need to continue to encourage, not in a negative way. It should be positive competition rather
Right.
than, sort of beggar your neighbor kind of competition. But one more thing, something that had slipped my mind. We talked about IIT Madras related space companies. The other one that I forgot is Agnikul, doing
Agreed,
very
of course.
well, and
Yeah.
Skyroot. So it's
I
great
know.
that
I know somebody who wrote the first check for Skyroot is amazingly wealthy now.
there are opportunities, obviously, in many of these sectors, and our people are, especially our young people, are coming out. You mentioned Galaxy and so on. So this is great news, and um, I think we're kind of running close to time. So let me ask you a final question, okay? The one that I think many people really would want to know. See, if you knew exactly how a reform oriented government thinks and decides and executes, how would you run your business and how would you run it differently? So that's sort of the, putting it in the, sort of putting yourself in the shoes of the entrepreneur or the businessman. How would you advise them to deal with government today?
I would say you would and you should run your business exactly the way which puts in the customer at the center of it. Uh, do not worry about the government. Do not think a lot about the government. You have to just know that there is a government which is out there to back you up and support wealth creation. And I will know that I have the tools available to hold the government accountable, to redress issues. And ideally, I would say forget about the government, run your business, more than anything else. And on a on a parting note, also, I think a lot of people understand this very well, that you of course then ultimately primarily focus on the human side of things. Your employees, your customers. That's where value will come in. And when I was working in the government, I had the same thing. I what I mentioned earlier, that 25 crore people to be connected to the grid. Yes, yes, yes. A, B, C. This is what you have to do. Cookie cutter approach, efficiency, get it done. We don't think about the people behind those numbers. So I'll give you one example which may help. When I used to get a lot of letters in Government of India, representations as they call it. We don't have electricity in our house, so we used to do whatever we could to make sure it happens faster within the policy. One day I got a letter from somebody who said, I'm the father of a 21-year-old girl, and my daughter cannot get married because there is no electricity at our house, and the potential in-laws will not come to a dark house. And I was zapped, because we think of these issues from an economic perspective. Okay, you can't work more, you can't study in the night, etc., etc. I never thought that from a cultural perspective, you cannot get married if you don't have electricity. So I did whatever I could, and few days later, I got another letter that my daughter's wedding is fixed on so and so date, and you are the chief guest. You must come for it. And I was like, I would say one of the most satisfying days in my life. And some people ask whether it is inevitable that India will remain backward, and I would say definitely not, because I danced at a wedding which proved that India can. Thank you.
That's a wonderful story because here you actually are making a huge difference to individuals, right? These are not anonymous, faceless people. They're real people, and their lives are being changed by, the government's acts. And I mean, having electricity is so basic. We middle class people don't tend to think about it, but
Correct.
for someone who's deprived, and I'm so glad that this girl, she actually got married, and you actually went to that wedding. That's great. But
And
let
it
me,
was what was surprising to me was that that village
yeah,
was actually very close to Delhi. So we are not really talking about something in the eastern Bihar even or West Bengal. It's
yeah.
only a couple of hours from Delhi. Those villages did not have electricity till 2014. So
Hmm.
it's I would say heartbreaking to actually see the kind of or lack of progress sometimes which happened.
Yeah, the deprivation. In fact, in that context, we in Kerala have been lucky because we had very enlightened, royals, the
Yeah.
Travancore royals. So we had a certain level of development that was much greater than many other parts of the country. But now it's evening out. But let me ask you a tough question. See,
Hmm.
one of the problems that all of us face with government at every level is corruption, right?
Yeah.
You got to, hand over some money. You need to know the right people.
Yeah.
And I'll just give you an example of my getting a driving license. I went to this driving license RTO, and a tout told me, "Look, I can fix this for you. Just give me 1,500 rupees. Okay,
Yeah.
your driving license is going to be done." And I did. I gave him 1,500 rupees, and I got it, which I'm not proud to admit. But it's so easy to get into that loop of sort of
Yeah.
avoiding complexity by just paying somebody, and that becomes a huge problem. What is your answer to that, the problem of corruption governance?
I'll give you one example. This is not something which happened to me, but somebody told me, somebody very senior told me, a wife of a very, very senior person. She took an auto once. Her car was broken down and not available, so she had to take an auto in Delhi. She took the auto, and after she got dropped, he asked how much, and the auto driver asked for an exorbitant number. And she was like, "What's happening?" And this is like, I think, 2013 or so. The person said, very in a very casual manner, the auto driver, and I will say it in Hindi and then repeat in English so that people get it. uh, मैडम, थोड़े पैसे ही तो ज्यादा मांगे हैं, कोयले की खदान तो नहीं मांगी. I've only asked for a few more rupees, not for a coal mine. So when you have people at the top sitting and siphoning off coal mines, then of course people at the bottom will say, okay, they are getting the cream of the pie. Let us also get some crumbs of the pie. And
Right.
logically you cannot argue with them a lot. Then fortunately that era is over. You don't have, at least in government of India, I will not say for every single state, but at a large level, at an institutional level, you do not have cases of ministers indulging in massive corruption, or the prime minister indulging in massive corruption, blatant corruption. Thankfully, we have come a long way from there. There were attempts, for example, uh, to accuse that, okay, very high level corruption has happened in, say, Rafael procurement, and we all saw what happened in the Supreme Court, and finally what happened, and how that procurement actually helped us in Operation Sindoor.
Hmm?
You cannot imagine Operation Sindoor without those jets. And when the government tried to buy them, the harrowing time they had to go through, but they could come out clean. So there is a certain, I would say, cleanliness at the top at Government of India. I would not say it's at all levels. I would not be so brave to make that statement. And then, of course, states vary quite a bit in terms of their transparency and ethics. I would say two things you have to do. Number one, you have the choice to do business in a particular state. Choose your state wisely. That's a choice you have. You cannot choose a lot of things in your life, but you can choose to where to house your business, where to grow it, etc., etc. I think it makes a lot of difference. There are states who are doing amazingly well. There are states, for example, that they are opening up tremendously. So, for example, just yesterday or day before, uh, the West Bengal government said that they're actually going to develop Nandigram, which was the site of the infamous protest against Tata Motors, Tata Nano's factory. There is a reversal happening there. Is that an opportunity? Maybe. But I would leave it to the people to evaluate. So you are making choices. Please make your choice basis that also. And do know your rights. Do that you have options available. And if a small person on the street, for example, can fight against the system sometimes, like I know we're out of time, but maybe 30-second example. When we, and I go back to power because I thought that was a very fulfilling time for me personally. So I'll give another example over there. When we were electrifying villages, we created a portal and an app where every single photo of the progress of electrification was put in, videos, photos, so you could see what transformer has come into your village, what poles have come, what cabling has come, how are they being set up. The photos used to come. But you had an option to say, okay, I'm from this village. This is not the reality on ground. The photo shows something else, but the reality is something else. And we got a complaint like that once from somebody in a village. And we checked. And he said that you are showing a transformer there. There is actually no transformer there. So we checked and we realized that the contractor who was doing the job has actually sold the transformer as scrap. He put in the transformer, then he removed it and he actually sold it further. So there was like massive corruption happening. But we could see somebody an individual who did not even have electricity in his home, but actually standing up and saying, no, there is corruption here. This is not right. This has to be changed. And we were able to thankfully redress that. So do not consider yourself as defenseless. You have a lot of options. If you believe that you are right, doing the right thing, I think a lot of these obstacles disappear. Again, a 30-second example over here, because I primarily work with multinationals coming to India. One of the things about them is, the multinationals, the American ones, are governed under Foreign Corrupt Practices Act, right? The FCPA, which means that they cannot give any money at all through any means, right? Now, once you have that, once the other party knows that you absolutely cannot give a bribe, will actually sit and wait forever. Then the expectation from the other side also moderates. That okay, ये तो देने वाला ही नहीं है, इसको waste क्यों करो time? Let's go to somebody else who can probably give. And I don't know how many people have read that book. There's an amazing book about Mr. Narayan Murthy. When he was setting up Infosys and he had to get a license for importing a computer, and he had a very tough time getting space for housing his computer and etc. And when the computer came to the airport, they had imported it via air. When it came to the airport, the customs officer, this is all documented. So again, how I don't know how many know, this is 80s, so much more, very different India, but same principle. The customs officer at airport said, oh, there is some problem with this, paperwork is not right. And Murthy said, oh, no, we have the license, this is the license. Customs officer says, I don't care what paper you have to give me money. That's it. So Narayan Murthy was sitting at the customs line and he had that option that he has put in so much effort. He has traveled 50 times to Delhi. He has begged, cajoled, gone hungry to save money, to start the company, to pay his employees. There are people whose livelihood is at stake. If I was in that situation and I had to give 20,000 to the customs officer, I don't know what I will do. I'll probably succumb to that temptation to just give that speed money and get out of there. What did Naran Murthy do? He said he refused. He said, let the computer be at the airport. I don't care. And I will fight it the right way. And he fought and he actually won later, not immediately. So there are examples. So I think, and of course, Naran Murthy is also an IITian. So I think we can learn a lot, especially from him.
Right. Yeah. I mean, let's be honest. Corruption exists everywhere. For example, in the U.S., corruption is at the higher levels, not petty corruption. Right. Here,
Yeah.
it's the opposite now. Right. So anyway, so let's. I think as we're sort of out of time, let me just go through some of the questions that came up. So thank you very much, Anuj, for this enlightening exposition on how people can work with government and some of the examples of how well things have turned out. And obviously, this is just the beginning. We're going to do much better at scale. But here are a few questions. This is an interesting one from Lalit Sharma. He has got a problem with the freebies policy. What he says is, see, if we give freebies rather than a social security framework, the easy money takes away unskilled and semi-skilled manpower from the ecosystem and raises the cost of manpower for industries. So I think he's talking about the MG and NREGA.
Yeah. Manrega.
So
Yeah.
he is the
Now it's called G Ram G. Yes.
right.
Yeah.
So he is objecting to that. He says the freebies are not good. So do you have a comment on that?
So 2 points over here. Number one, if you look at G Ram G, especially the restructuring which happened last year, Manrega has moved from being a program which used to do, for example, fix a road, see it getting washed out the next monsoon, fix it again, pay the people again, do it, go back to zero, do it again, go back to zero. So it was probably, I would say, closer to what Lalit is speaking about in terms of freebie. Although technically it's not a freebie, you are being paid for your labor. A freebie, I would say, would be getting a washing machine in Tamil
Can I
Nadu.
can I
Or
give a clarity? Can I give a
yeah,
clarity, Anuj? So this is regarding the Ladli Behan, the Mahila Vikas, the electoral SOPs, which even
I
TVK
think you're
government.
frozen, Lalit.
Uh,
No, it's
uh,
okay. Just go ahead, Lalit, briefly.
Yeah. So if you think about all these the Ladli Behens and all those the unemployment 1,500 2,000 rupees. G Ramji, I totally agree with you. It's not a freebie. It's a basically payout against a work 200 days or 180 days minimum. I totally agree on that. But that also takes away the unskilled and skilled labor from the whole ecosystem out, and the minimum wages are increasing to 21 to 25,000 and all those kind of things, which is making SMEs a little bit tougher to get the things. But the real problem is these very 1,500 or 2,000 rupees to the ladies that are being offered in all elections, which make the last mile boys, the Zepto, Zomato manpower more easily available because their households are being taken care of and they are not coming into the mainframe of the structured jobs for the industries. So that is where the gig worker economy is booming more and more because of the freebies. That I'll put it like.
Yeah. So I'll get to the point here. I think what you're trying to ask is that should the government be giving these kind of freebies or not? Now I have a specific viewpoint over here. This is my personal view that I always believe that people should be given the choice to determine what they want to do with their life, with their resources, etc., rather than the government deciding how it should be spent. So, what we have seen over the course of last few years of a lot more direct benefit transfer, giving cash to people, letting them figure out do they want to spend that money on education, on health, maybe better makeup, maybe taking a very real example, maybe spending more money on gutka, anything. But who are you to judge what the other person is doing? And I think the other underlying fear which you have, a lot of people have in this entire construct is that will it bankrupt the government? right? It's all about money. Okay, why are you spending so much money? We have to understand the structure of public finance in India to get this better. We have an act in India called Fiscal Responsibility and Budgetary Management Act. The way the act has been defined, and if some of you would have read the Constitution, one of the articles of the Constitution says that if any state has borrowed even a single rupee from Government of India, then for borrowing even an additional extra rupee, they have to get permission from Government of India. So the fathers of the nation very critically thought about how can we retain the federal structure and the fiscal sanity of it, wherein if you take some resources from government of India, then you are almost, I would say, beholden to them, which will ensure that you are able to pay back, etc., etc. Based on that article of the Constitution, it's called, I think, Article 219, if I'm not mistaken. Based on that article, a Fiscal Responsibility and Budgetary Management Act says that your state's deficit can only be up to 3% of your GSDP, your state GSD. I think everybody understands GDP equivalent of a state. So that's the hard limit which the state has. Now, because of that, what happens is if Vijay has to decide that do I give 3,000 rupees to women, every woman, versus do I build better roads? Do I build better electricity supply? Do I incentivize a global company to come to Tamil Nadu and invest? I think he has that portfolio of choices available to him, and he can do that trade offs that, okay, 50% money I will put this way, 20% here, 20% here, 10% here. He does not have unlimited budget. There are limits on it, which is why the system has checks and balances. I'll give you another example. Again, going back to power sector. Sorry for that. Power and your roadways are two of the worst sectors in a state. State roadways buses are, frankly speaking, pathetic, right? State electricity supply, you know how it is. Why is it so? Why is conditions so bad in some of these sectors? The reason for that is that these sectors in most of the states are what is called off balance sheet items. So
Yes.
when the power distribution company loses money, it does not get counted as part of the state budget. So what we as citizens have to demand is that all these off-balance sheet liabilities and items should be counted towards the state budget. State should include everything they promise and actually give that. The problem which comes, and I would say that the more severe problem, like what you see in Punjab, the Aam Aadmi Party promised that they will give certain amount of money to every woman. Nearly 4 years have passed. They have not done that. I think it is unfair to the electorate. If you have promised it, you should do the calculation before you get into power that, okay, I'm promising this is the share of the budget, this is how I'll cut down on something else, which is not efficient. I'll cut down on, say, bureaucrat salary, hiring all those people, I'll cut down on my own travel, whatever you have to do. But if you have made a promise to people, you better live up to it. And I think Indian people are very smart. Whenever they see that people are not living up to that promise, they strike them down pretty fast.
Okay, then let's move on. Mohan gives an example of petrol costs that range all the way from 85 in Andamans to 114 in AP as an example of how different states are offering different levels of taxing. And another question here from Gurdeep. He says, in the same context, when crude was around 70 to $80 per barrel, the profits accrue to government. But when crude goes up, losses need to be socialized within months. I guess what he's saying is that the government got money earlier, made profits, and just give it back. But it doesn't work that way, does it? In the sense that we had these oil bonds that were really ruinous for the country for a long time. So at the end of the day, in my opinion at least, we should make the prices reflect global realities rather than insulate against them. I don't know what you think.
I think Mohan wants to say something. He had that point also.
Yeah, Mohan.
Will he be able to unmute himself? No. So I'll just answer this very simply. I set the number of 37 crore people below poverty line when I started. Uh, Today, 27 crore out of those have come out of poverty line. 10 crore are still there. So it's not that the challenge has disappeared. Did it take tremendous financial resources to get those 27 crore people above the poverty line? Are they the consumers of tomorrow? Will they be the ones which will drive a lot of Indian businesses growth, and I would even say social cohesiveness and unity? Yes. Now, where does that money come from? That money has come from some of the taxes you are speaking about. Now, one can say that they could have increased it, and the other piece of that argument would be that the government is literally almost trying to keep the prices within a certain range. So there is like a stability of prices. So the prices should ideally be between, say, 70 to 100 rupees broadly. It should not be like what you said, when the crude became half of what it is today, the petrol price should not be 30, 40 rupees. When it becomes that, then you also have other externalities. So, for example, environment is another factor which comes into play. Do you want to actually invest resources in renewable energy versus actually foregoing a lot of revenue, potential revenue, by selling petrol at a lower cost, which has environmental impact? And these are real things. Why is Delhi so messed up in winter? It is the primary reason is not just farmers in Punjab. It is because of the local traffic pollution in Delhi. So if you sit in Delhi and say government is not doing anything for pollution, and on the other hand you say government is not letting petrol to be priced at 40, I think you're being a hypocrite over there. Yeah, you have to reconcile your choices somewhere.
Okay. Mohan asked this question about ration cards. He says, aren't they given out for family? How does this apply to migrant workers who live away from their family?
The So a lot of the migrant workers are actually moved with their family also. They will move with their kids and women. So they will get access to their entire ration for the family which is sitting in Gujarat. Yes, there are a lot of people who will not go with the family. Then they will have this choice that they can take the ration in Bihar or versus taking in Gujarat. The important thing is that they have the choice now, as opposed to earlier when it was perforce to be taken only in Bihar. What they can also do is take for 1 month in Bihar and 1 month in Gujarat, and store it in Gujarat for a few months, then take it again whenever you are short on that. So it's all about giving people the choice. Let the government not decide, let the people decide.
And this is also relevant in terms of the one nation, one vote kind of thing,
Yeah,
right?
right.
So okay, right. Mr. Karma Chandran asks, why is the government not forcing corporates to do compulsory spending as a percentage of sales in R&D? Okay, like CSR funding. He says R&D spending is more important at this stage of growth in India rather than maybe CSR, which may not be as relevant. So I think he's saying there should be or there could be a forced limit below which the company must not reduce its R&D spending. Is that realistic?
So there are a few things. If you look at historically, there are a few ways government has incentivized R&D spending. So, for example, tax breaks on R&D spending. So essentially your spending becomes that much more cheaper if you are currently spending 1% of your revenue on R&D. Because the tax break, you may end up spending 1.5%. So that's a kind of example you have. Whether they should mandate it or not, I think, is a larger public choice question. I would say three facts to just keep in mind. A, when you force it, will it actually be as effective as a voluntary R&D, or will it become a bit like the forced CSR spending, which in many cases is actually almost like a sham? right? When you're forcing people to do CSR, then they figure out very creative ways to do something which is related to their own business or otherwise. So you ask me personally, I'm not in favor of state getting its dirty fingers and hands into everything in our lives. I think they already have a lot of that. I would be very happy to have less of the government and less of the government deciding. If government is so benevolent, I think they should fix their own house in order first. They should fix their own R&D. That's what they should really focus on. And of course, they are doing a few things on, for example, there is a research development and innovation fund, a 1 lakh crore fund they are starting, which will create a multiplier effect for private investment. I think that's a good step. But the fact of the matter is, look at our R&D institutions, CSIR, and what have you. What kind of innovations have come out of it? Have they been in line with the amount of effort which has gone into it? Probably not. So before the government preaches to the private sector that you should do R&D, I would turn around and say, do what you preach first.
Okay. I think we'll take just one more question. I'm sorry, there are a few more in the pipeline, but don't have time for that. MD Menon says, population. Government should subtly encourage population to reduce to sustainable levels, say 90 crores, keeping in mind the technology environment, robotics, etc., conservation, environment. So he says, should the government force people to not have children or reduce the number of children that they have?
So I have a different point of view. The counter argument to that, also a policy question, is you're saying, should the government force people to not have kids? I would say, should the government force people to have more kids?
Okay.
We are actually probably moving away from one problem to another. Just yesterday, you may have seen Andhra Pradesh has, for example, rolled out incentives for people to have third and fourth kids. It's also a very political question where the birth rates in North are very different from South India, resulting in changes in demographics and the voting capacity, etc., etc. I think China's example is very instructive. China will be the average age in China will be higher than US in less than a decade. It'll be higher than UK a few years after that. So China has become a very old country very fast because of the one-child policy. I think India probably dogged a bullet over there, despite all the heroic efforts of Sanjay Gandhi. So I think it's a very sensitive question. You ask me personally, I would be in favor of having many more people rather than less people. I think people are the ones who will drive innovation and growth and the country. Even if all these things come in, AI, etc., I think it's perfectly fine for people to sit and just think the entire day and not do anything. Let the machines do the work. But that thinking, I think, is, or even if they don't think, even if they are doing whatever they feel like, it's individual choice again, right? Who am I to judge if somebody sleeps the entire day? But I think we should have many more people deciding and figuring out what they want to do.
On that note, I'm afraid we'll have to stop because we're 20 minutes over time. I agree with you, Anuj. The government should not have this heavy hand of imposing things on people. People should have their choices. So, thank you very, very much, Anuj, for spending this time with us and exploring ways in which we can really rethink our relation to government as entrepreneurs and small businesses and so on. So thank you once again, and thank you to all the participants. So we will
Thank
stop
you.
this.
Thank you for having me.
Sure, we'll stop this podcast now. Thank you, Maha, for managing it. Bye
Thank you,
bye.
everyone. Bye.
Bye.